Hamer back again with another Mission Impossible episode review. This time I'm doing Season 3, Episode 18, which is called Live Bait. So we start with Jim cruising over to another viewfinder device to get instructions. I have a feeling this is recycled footage too, but I'm not 100% certain from where. This time, stay with me here. The mission is, there's an American agent named Orrin Selby who has managed to become an important security official in a foreign country. But Security Chief Kellerman suspects that he is an American agent. And Kellerman has captured another agent named Marceau, who knows about Selby and is being tortured and interrogated for information. The IMF must protect Selby and neutralize Kellerman. In the apartment scene, the IMF, minus Willie, sadly, discuss that they must use a young officer named Albert Brock, who works in Selby's office, but reports to Kellerman. Jim says they'll get Selby out of the country if they must, but they want to try and maintain his cover, and there's also a mention of liquid nitrogen for some reason. Off we go to dingy Ruritania, where Selby learns from Brock, played by a very young Martin Sheen, that Kellerman was asked to turn over Marceau to Selby, as per protocol, but he refused, so Selby is forced to call for an investigation from headquarters. Kellerman listens to their conversation using a bug planted in Selby's office and tells Brock there's nothing to worry about, the investigation will reveal nothing. Rollin arrives as the investigator and Selby shows him the bug. Selby explains that Brock is helping Kellerman and that Kellerman is actually the double agent. Kellerman enters the room and the men discuss the situation. Rollin tells Kellerman to come to his hotel room in an hour to discuss it further, leaving Selby frustrated. For Kellerman and Brock's benefit, Selby pretends to call HQ again to positively confirm Rollin's identity, I guess to prevent them from calling themselves. We cut to Marceau, who's being held upside down in some sort of cage for interrogation by Kellerman, who's trying to put the pieces together to confirm that Marceau is the one who arranged for Selby to enter the country as an agent in the first place. But Marceau refuses to talk. Rollin and Kellerman meet as discussed, and Kellerman tells him that he will soon have proof about Selby. Rollin says he can't delay Selby's request for more than a day or so about turning Marceau over. Kellerman says that if Marceau is turned over, Selby will arrange for the Americans to get him spirited away from the country. Rollin indicates that they might already be coming. This gives Kellerman the idea to feed the Americans false information about where Marceau is being held through Brock, which would also help prove the suspicions about Selby. Brock is said to be easy to manipulate because of his girlfriend, Stephanie. Kellerman tells Rollin to tell Selby that Brock knows where Marceau is being held to set the trap. Meanwhile, Kellerman gives Brock the plans to the holding facility and tells him to plant them in Selby's office when he gives the word. Brock is nervous about doing it, but he follows orders. In the hotel room, the IMF shoots some more footage for later, which Barney uses to doctor the footage of Rollin and Kellerman that he took from earlier. Cinnamon calls telling Jim that Brock has arrived at Stephanie's place and he was swallowed. Brock tries to convince Stephanie to get out of the city for a few days until the Selby matter boils over. She doesn't want to go, but Albert convinces her that Kellerman has promised him a promotion and has arranged a high-level meeting for her that will help her career, so she gives in. Jim arrives as Albert leaves, followed by Kellerman's man. Another security man takes a picture of Jim as he enters the building. Jim confronts Stephanie, while Cinnamon deliberately rides her bike into Albert's car. He takes her to a hospital as Kellerman's guy takes pictures of the scene. Kellerman and Rollin study the picture, with Kellerman saying it wasn't an accident, as the bike was purchased that morning by someone using a false name. He has a receipt. Kellerman also shows Rollin a picture of Jim with Stephanie, and he considers it all proof that the Americans are moving in on Brock. Kellerman's guy spots Cinnamon later, walking perfectly normally and showing no signs of a leg injury from the bike accident. She leaves a parcel at an office which is brought to Kellerman and is found to be wrapped with magnetic tape, which he makes a copy of. Jim later comes to retrieve the package, and Kellerman plays the tape for Rollin, which is Cinnamon's voice indicating that Brock has given them the plans to the holding facility as he predicted. We see Stephanie in a room asleep with Jim planting a passport and some money in her coat, and she wakes up after a while, confused. She hears voices in the next room and sees the doctored footage the IMF has prepared. with Kellerman talking to Jim about Albert being an expendable pawn in their game, and then escapes through the window. She calls Albert, who's being told by Kellerman to put the plans in Selby's room now, and tells him what happened. Albert speaks carefully, as Kellerman is in the room, and Stephanie tells him that he was one of the people who kidnapped her, to Albert's shock. Both are confused, but agree to meet in an hour. Albert goes to Selby's office, covers up the bug with a wine glass, and says he's now convinced that Kellerman is the real double agent, and asks what they should do. Selby says he'll do nothing, as he knows that Albert is the one who tried to sell him out in the first place, and he's clearly crying wolf, so why should he believe anything he says? Brock is scared and protests his innocence to no avail. Kellerman shows Rollin that the false blueprints will lead the Americans into a trap, and also shows Rollin where Marceau is actually being held, deep in the basement of the building. Rollin interrogates Marceau to no avail, and Kellerman tells him that Marceau's chains are part of an electrical circuit that will set off an anti-personnel mine if tampered with. Rollin calls Jim and relays this newfound information in code, and Kellerman's man tells him that the Americans are headed to the facility. Brock and Stephanie are found trying to head out of the country and brought back to Kellerman's office. Brock tells Rollin that Kellerman's a double agent, and Rollin wonders why Stephanie had the passport and money in her coat. Very suspicious. She, of course, denies knowing anything about it, but Kellerman threatens her that people have been executed for less, which scares her witless, and she admits that Albert is the real traitor, to Albert's abject shock. Rollin has her taken away and tells Kellerman to keep Brock in his office. Rollin heads down to Marceau's cell, taking an antidote pill and setting off a fast-acting anesthetic, feeding it into the building's air supply, which subdues the entire building, allowing the IMF to enter and join him. Barney starts rigging up the liquid nitrogen to neutralize the detonator on Marceau's chain, while Rollin and Jim grab Kellerman and bring him down to the cell. The liquid nitrogen works, and Marceau is freed. He leaves with the IMF as Rollin revives Brock, and they find that Kellerman is gone from his office. They go down to the cell, they find Marceau gone, and Kellerman lying there unconscious. Rollin laments that he will have to face the consequences of being wrong about Kellerman, and reported back to headquarters, but Albert says, nah, there's another way to make the whole issue go away. And Rollin agrees, saying that by doing so, Selby will take Brock back into his apparatus now and start to trust him. Kellerman wakes up and finds Brock's pistol in his face as the IMF make their exit. Mission accomplished. This one is a really, really difficult one to grade. I think I'm going to do what I've done, I think at least once before, which is to actually go through kind of the good and the bad before I give it a final grade. I have an idea in my mind. I'm going to talk it out and see if I can convince myself that I'm right. The good. The guest stars are fantastic. Anthony Zerbe is great. We've seen him before in The Photographer. We will see him again in more episodes coming up. He's a once a season guest star for at least the next 3 seasons. I'm not sure if he's in the final season. I have a feeling that he's not. But anyway, he's great. Martin Sheen is absolutely great in this as the very nervous and unsettled and unsure of himself Brock. I think he plays that role really, 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 really well. Diane Ewing as Stephanie, also okay. I don't know. There's I don't get the greatest vibe from her, but she's fine. Nothing wrong with her performance here. Moving on from that, I'm really having a bit of a tough time coming up with other stuff to say about it that's really good. There's decent teamwork here. Cinnamon doesn't have a whole heck of a lot to do. It's mostly the guys, and there's no Willie. So the teamwork aspect is kind of lacking here. The plot. Unfortunately, I don't really know how else to say it. I'm gonna put it in the not good category. It's not that it's a bad plot, but it's ridiculously convoluted. Try to explain this even to somebody who has watched, like me trying to make this summary and recap of the episode, not simple. Even to kind of, boil down, a description of the mission down to a sentence or two is really, really, really tough. So convoluted, not easy to follow, and because it's got way too much of the whole duplicity aspect, where you've got so many people working, with their own agendas and trying to outmaneuver one another. We've seen episodes with that. Like, for example, just a couple of episodes ago, we saw the glass cage, where we had characters who all had their own ambitions politically, career-wise, all of that kind of thing. And of course, they're all kind of trying to maintain their status, and that's integral to the plot. But that wasn't just so out there like this is. There's just way too much going on in this episode, and the term that I would use for it, to kind of borrow it from professional wrestling, is overbooked. Overbooked is what we call in wrestling when there's too much going on in a match. It starts out with two guys, but then, this guy's buddy comes in and that guy's buddy comes in, and then this happens and that happens. It's like, why are you guys doing all of that instead of just having like a one-on-one match? I have the same feeling about this plot. It is too complicated for its own good, way too intricate, and it almost as though, and I'm sure that this was probably not the case, but almost as though the script was designed by a committee and every person wanted to kind of get their stuff into the script. I'm sure that wasn't the case, but it certainly feels like it. Other things that I found that weren't good, again, as a math and science nut, I have to take issue with the fact that Barney, when he's talking with the liquid nitrogen, says that, the temperature will go down to minus 209 degrees. I'm not sure whether he's talking about Fahrenheit or Celsius, but it doesn't really matter, because if we're talking about minus 209 Fahrenheit, that, or even if it is Celsius, although Fahrenheit is not as close as Celsius would be, that's not near absolute zero, as he says explicitly. Absolute zero is minus 273 degrees. There's a fair bit of difference. I mean, it's sort of close. It's probably close enough for the purposes that they need, but why would you have to throw that out there? It's really kind of not near absolute zero in a technical sense. So that's a nit that I feel that I must pick. The last nit that I'm going to pick is what I think is a really, really, really big flaw in this episode. And it's the scene towards the end where, Brock and Stephanie are together in Kellerman's office. And I'm having such a difficult time. I went back and watched it again. Why in the world does Stephanie dime Albert? I just find that to be so ridiculous that after, everything that happens in this episode, she just turns on him at the drop of a hat. Maybe saying to do it at the drop of a hat is a little bit unfair, because Kellerman is basically in her face and intimidating her, even though of course he claims he's not, and telling her that hey, innocent people have been executed for a lot less than just having a foreign passport in their coat. But just like that, on one level it doesn't make sense. On a completely different level, no matter what explanation you can try to give me, I don't like it. Like, what is it? Is she just really that scared? Does she know that Albert really is a wimp and has no ability to protect her? if that's the case, there's no foundation laid for that at all. You know, she agrees to go away with him earlier. She obviously agrees to go away with him after he feels like there's no, there's no escape because Selby won't help him. And, now Kellerman ostensibly has kidnapped Stephanie, and he doesn't know who to trust. She went away with him. The only explanation that I found in doing some reading of a couple of other reviews of this episode was that Stephanie has really just been using Albert and doesn't actually care about him and doesn't actually love him. Or, I mean, she may care about him, but not more than, let's say, her career or anything like that. And she figures that Kellerman, she's better off supporting him because she sees the kind of the writing on the wall that Albert's not going to be able to work his way out of this, and I better protect myself. I do not feel that that is a satisfactory explanation. I really, really don't. It's one of those things that the optics of that, Stephanie just betraying Albert and just giving him up, are so bad. Even if the best explanation is that she's just scared out of her skull. That's not good. Any of the other explanations is even worse. And frankly, if it was like that, if it was something like, she feels she's better off without Albert, or, at least not supporting him in his treason or whatever you want to say, she didn't have to go away with him. She didn't have to run to the border with him. She could have stayed. She could have said, forget it, Albert, I'm sick of all of this crap and I'm staying. That would have made a little bit more sense. But for her to go away with him and then suddenly, now that they got caught, now she's all willing to give him up. The only way that I think that could have been salvaged is for Rollin to press her a little bit more, for Kellerman to push her at that point after she feels, oh my God, this guy kidnapped me and now all of this stuff is going on. I think it would have made a lot more sense if Rollin had been the one to come at her and say, you know what, Stephanie, you're in really, really big trouble. I'm going to take this information to headquarters, and, do you really want to go down with your boyfriend? That might have made a little bit more sense to me. But the way that it happened, to me, again, even if you can give me an explanation that makes sense, I won't like it. I really don't think so. Anyway, now that we've gone through all of that to come around to the grade, what I started out with, I wanted to say that I want to give this episode a grade of a C-. I'm very, very tempted to put it down at D+ or D, but I think that the performances of Zerb and Martin Sheen are at least good enough to put it in the C-, C- category, despite all of the bad that I've just basically outlined here. I'm comfortable with that C-. Let's just leave it at that. I think I've said enough for this episode. This is going to turn out to be a pretty long video, but again, there was so much to say and so much that needed to be explained for any of this to make sense, I feel. So let's just leave it at that. Thank you for watching. Please like this episode. Please subscribe to my channel, and please leave your comments. I would really love to hear what other people have to say, especially about that scene and about the whole vibe between Stephanie and Albert in this one, because it really, really bugs me. But again, if you have something else, if you think, hey, Marie, this is what you need to think about, I would love to hear it. Thank you again, and I'll see you next time.